Hello, adventurers, and welcome back to the Dragon's Lair. Today we'll be discussing the better half of the royal couple, and my personal favorite character, May. So, let's jump right into it, shall we? Starting off with strength. It's one of those scores that May doesn't really use a whole lot. As such, it's not really important to her. So it's not going to be super high, but at the same point in time, May isn't a weak character. So, it's not going to be low either. The only real arguments we have for one way or another is, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, we should be good, is when May does a flying sidekick into a saw that was wedged into the gondola rope system in the prison escape episode of The Boiling Rock. A beautiful kick, and she manages to unwedge the saw and send it flying off. Which is going to take a little bit of strength to do, given the fact that it took 2 guards to try to cut through the rope using the saw. Another argument there is that May's weapons are made out of metal, and she does have a lot of them on her at any given time to throw. So that's going to weigh her down, assuming you use the weight system in D&D, which would require a lot of strength for her to be able to carry at any given time. So because of that, I'm placing her strength score at 12 to 14, mainly because of the saw, but also there is an argument to be made about the weight of her weapons. Moving into dexterity. May is a very dexterous character. I would argue not necessarily as dexterous as someone like Aang, who revolves around dexterity, but definitely on par with someone like Sokka. For instance, her dexterity can be seen in, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, we should be good. That same prison escape episode, when she takes on at least 7 prison guards that are all trying to, at the very least, apprehend her. For instance, she ducks out of the way of one prison guard trying to fire strike her, or fire punch her, and throws 2 darts, or daggers rather, into 2 others that were coming up on her very quickly. That sort of thing. So she is very dexterous. Dexterity is your ability to dodge strikes and attack at the same point in time, or how quickly you can dodge strikes and how quickly you can attack. So, by dodging and attacking at the same point in time, like May does quite often, proves her dexterity. Another instance of just her ability to attack is when she throws a knife at Aang through falling scaffolding, and actually manages to get it through. The only reason the strike didn't hit Aang was because Aang took his bow staff and spun it around wildly and actually wound up catching the knife. Another instance is when Katara and May are sparring back and forth, and Katara does a bit of a water whip towards May. Well, May dodges that by leaning out of the way, and at the same point in time attacks using a mechanism on her leg to shoot out an arrow towards Katara. Which narrowly misses because Katara is able to block it, I believe is how that works. It's not written. I just don't remember if Katara blocked it or dodged. I would imagine blocked. So, yeah, May is very good at dodging strikes and attacking quickly. So very dexterous. I'm saying 16 to 18, with 20 being more than reasonable. Into Constitution. I don't know if you've heard. Allow me to impart this knowledge on you, adventurers. Constitution doesn't come up a whole lot in the show. It comes up even less so for May. We don't have anything for her. Like, at all. I even sent a few messages to a few of my friends just to see if they could cover for me and see if I had missed anything, and they all came back with a no. So, because we just don't have any information on her Constitution, I've got to go straight 10, because we just don't know. Into Intelligence. May is relatively smart, but the question is how smart. One would argue she's not, like, wizard level of smart, but also she's not barbarian level of lacking intelligence. She knows how to fight, so that counts for something, but it doesn't count for much because everyone in the show knows how to fight with their fighting style. However, it is assumable that May is in on the planning process with someone like Azula and Ty Lee, as they are in the group together and would bounce ideas off of each other, assumably. But we don't know about that. We can't guarantee it. The only real thing I have for May's intelligence is, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1. We should be good. She seems to know what people want from a fight, assumably a byproduct from working with Azula for as long as she has. Like when she knows what Toph wants, when Toph bursts into the throne room of the Earth Kingdom and demands the bear. May was smart enough and perhaps wise enough, I'll get into that in a second, to realize that Toph was willing to fight May for the bear, and avoided the fight by just giving Toph the bear. So, we don't really know a whole lot about her intelligence, and the one example I did have for it kind of tied in with wisdom as well, so I'm going to go with 12 to 14 maximum on intelligence. Because she knows how to fight, and she knows her fighting style very well, but is she above and beyond? Not from what I've seen. Maybe you disagree with me, and that's your prerogative. Moving into wisdom. May grew up in the palace with, not in the palace, but she was there a lot with Azula and Ty Lee playing around. And as such, there would have been times where she would have been next to or relatively close to Iroh and may have overheard something. So that's just kind of a thought, an assumption that I have, which is going to count for something, but very little. You then have, I'll say spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, we should be good. I said that again, just in case. But we have the example that I just gave about how she knew what Toph wanted and was wise enough to avoid the fight by just giving Toph the bear. Right? Things of that nature. So there's a bit of wisdom there. And because of that, I'm going to put it at a very similar level to her intelligence score. Are you trying to signal me for something?
Zuko.
What about him?
He being a crybaby.
You're right. Yeah, thank you. So up until that point, I was going to put it at a similar level to intelligence, but I don't know how I forgot about this, but I managed to. Thank you. There was a point in time at the Ember Island episode where May said something that kind of showed how wise she was. Zuko had been pestering her all day and assumably longer about what she thought about other guys on Ember Island, and May said, I don't have any opinion on him, I barely know him. And that shows her ability to think through a couple of things. First off, that she doesn't judge a book by its cover, so to speak, which has to count for some sort of wisdom. And that even when she does know a little bit about them, she still holds off on forming fully fledged opinions until she knows much, much more. It also should show that she's wise enough to be able to stop a bad situation before it happens, diffuse a bad situation before it happens. Assuming Zuko isn't a crybaby, as you put it. Was that?
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd be very grateful that we use that terminology for him, but he's not here and he can't stop us. So
fine.
Get over it.
Yep.
So yes, I don't know how I forgot that. Thank you, Chill, for reminding me. That's going to put her wisdom at 14 to 16, a little higher. Yeah, I still can't believe that I forgot that. Moving on. Into charisma. This is a fun statistic. Spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1. We should be good. May is very distant and uncaring, we'll say. This is kind of a byproduct of her upbringing, about how she had to be the perfect child for one reason or another. So she kind of grew up not really caring about anything in order to remain the perfect child, not showing too much emotion and getting over-emotional at anything. So that comes off very cold and uncaring, which it is. Then we get into things like the real reason people play Bard. May doesn't flirt at all. despite what Zuko thinks in the Ember Island episode. She doesn't do that. It's just not something that interests her. She's dating Zuko, and she doesn't care about anyone else in that aspect. And then we move a little farther. Different reasons, or different things about charisma. I personally like her because of her clever insults and sarcasm, but looking at it from a charismatic point of view in the show, it makes her come off as mean and very rude, which, let's be fair, it is. But a lot of the times, in my opinion, it's funny. But for the show aspect of it, I'm putting her charisma at 6 to 8 because she doesn't care about anything. And she's actually kind of mean when you listen to what she has to say. So, 6 to 8. Did I miss anything, Chill?
Nah.
Thank you. Moving into race and class. Starting off with the race, for the straightforward build, it is human, obviously. I went human variant for you. You get a skill of your choice. You also get +1 to 2 different ability scores. But I went human variant, so you get the sharpshooter feat, which ignores 3/4 cover. It ignores the minimum range requirement for disadvantage on ranged weapons. Those are the two big reasons. There's another thing it gives you, which is -5 to hit, +10 to damage if you hit. That's neither here nor there for May, but it's useful in game, so it's a good addition. It certainly doesn't hurt. So yeah. As for class, I went Battle Master for 20 levels, and that's going to come as a surprise because most people were probably thinking Rogue, which makes sense admittedly, but none of them really fit May as much as they should have, in my opinion. I'll get into some things with Rogue as for the conceptual build, because Rogue does make sense. It was finding the right one. As for this, Battle Master, correct? I'm saying that incorrectly. For all 20 levels, it's a fighter subclass.
Battle Master.
Thank you. And this affords May a couple of extra attacks, which are really useful, and maneuvers. Chill, do you want to go ahead and list off the maneuvers for me?
Yes, sir. They are as follows: disarming attack, precision attack, evasive footwork, distracting strike, trip attack, pushing attack, parry, riposte, and commander strike.
Alright, thank you. So yeah, sorry, there was a lot to remember there, and Chill has it written in front of him. So thank you for the help. Only a few of those are melees, which was something I was very careful about when picking, because May is a very ranged person. It is parry and riposte, I believe, because those are weapon-to-weapon attacks, so they require melee actions on both ends. Yeah, those are the maneuvers I chose. Thank you again for doing my job for me. Moving into the conceptual build, if that is it. I believe it is.
Yeah.
Moving to the conceptual build. As for race, Fire Ganassi makes sense, but not really, because May isn't a bender. She doesn't have any sort of casting. But if you're going nationality, then yeah, it works. Things like elf make sense and work. Drow makes sense with the goth aesthetic of May. Wood elf, explicitly Aereni wood elf, makes sense as well because you get things like trance, dark vision, wisdom and dexterity increases, an extra 5 feet of movement, things of that nature. As well as Mask of the Wild, which is always useful. Thinking about it now, Tabaxi works with her race as well because you get extra movement. They get dexterity increases and I believe a charisma increase.
Maybe.
It's not written there, so it can't. I'll check it and it'll be down in the description. They get at least a dexterity increase, so that works with May. And they get a lot of extra movement. They have the feline agility, I believe is what it's called, that allows them to run or double their movement speed for a turn with The only downside being that in a future turn you have to move 0 feet. But you're not limited to the next turn you have to move 0 feet. You just can't use that ability again until you don't move at all in a turn. So that works too. Into class. You're going to have to help me with the archetype. But I did go rogue. Explicitly what archetype? Assassin. Yes, I remember. Because it makes sense with May. She's very stealthy and a rogue, essentially. She doesn't steal, really, in the show that we see, at least. I would assume she doesn't at all, because it doesn't really fit with her character style. So thief and that nature didn't make sense. But someone that was very stealthy and used a lot of ranged attacks made sense. The only part that doesn't work with her is the imposter portion, where you can mimic people's voices and that sort of thing. It doesn't go with her, like, at all. But aside from that, a lot of the other things rogues get, and most of the other things the assassins get, does. So that's kind of the best fitting archetype for May. Into backstory. May was born the daughter of a noble, and was raised to be the perfect only child until her little brother Tom came along much later. After all, May and her mother did have her father's political career to think about. As the daughter of a nobleman, she went to the Fire Nation Academy for Girls, where she met Azula and Ty Lee. Being good friends with Azula, she was over at the palace quite a bit, where she developed a slow burn romance and crush on Zuko. Eventually, May's father was sent to Omashu, renamed New Ozai, after it had been taken by the Fire Nation. That is where May was when Azula came to recruit her for Azula's special troop, we said, I believe is what I called it. That is where May's story begins. As for items, she does have a couple. First off, the Arm of Arrows, I believe is what I named it. Something like that. And what that is essentially a wristband, or bracer, that you put on your arm that holds arrows. And in the show, it doesn't have any real firing mechanism, so I said that it would require attunement for my build of it. And what this does, the attacking properties of it is, in a surprise round, the wielder of the Arm of Arrows would get their number of attacks plus 1 arrows, dealing 1d6 damage, piercing damage specifically, a piece on a hit. Each individual attack would be its own attack roll. In normal combat, they would get their number of attacks. So 1 arrow would equal 1 attack. Again, dealing 1d6 piercing damage as its base. There is a variant that can be made that can be worn on the leg, and doesn't cost any extra attunement slot if they already have one on their arm. May would have this, as seen in the show, when she does shoot an arrow at Katara after dodging the strike. I mentioned that earlier. Then we have her daggers. There are specific kinds of daggers. They're not like normal throwing daggers. They're also not like shurikens. So I created a little sub-thing for them. And they would deal normal dagger damage, I believe is 1d4. Piercing. Yeah, I believe it's 1d4. Mm-hmm. So, they would deal normal dagger damage, but since they're double-bladed daggers, they would have a +2 to hit. Arguably a +2 to damage, that's GM discretion. They could also be enchanted with either fire damage would make sense. I would personally lean towards a returning enchantment, to where when they throw the dagger after, or if you call it back as a bonus action, or you can call it back as a bonus action, you can throw it again for your next attack. Just kind of works with something like May's character and almost a belt of returning style thing. Mm-hmm. It just works with rogues. But that is all I have for you fine adventurers today. A big thank you again to Chill for helping me out a lot in this episode. If you have something to say, please leave a comment down below. Just make sure it's respectful, please. If you can't possibly wait until my next video, which will be on Zuko, feel free to check out my Discord or come hang out on Twitch. All links to my social media will be down in the description below. But aside from that, I will catch you all later.